And so without further ado, Helen Beard, thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rhiannon. Well, this is all relatively new work for me. So I'm going to talk you through my journey to creating this ceramic city and filming it. I have always been obsessed with drawing from a very young age. My dad was an architect, and one of my earliest memories of drawing is sitting with him on the pavement opposite our house on a little chair while he showed me how to draw using a pencil and closing one eye and trying to mark it out properly on a piece of paper. So this is my first building. And then I was fortunate to go to a really fantastic art college, Edinburgh College of Art, where I studied ceramics, but there was a great emphasis on drawing and sketchbooks. And so we would spend one day a week life drawing and filling sketchbooks and using drawing as a way of preparing and thinking about what we were doing in our ceramic work. And the sketchbook thing has really stuck with me. And over the years, I've always referred to my sketchbooks and taken my sketchbooks everywhere I go, documenting the world around me and really observing people. And I love how you can tell so much from a person's posture or a person's movement about, you know, what moment of time they're actually going through at that moment. I always challenge myself to try and loosen up my drawing style by hiding my paper and not looking at what I'm doing. So I can either put something between my sketchbook and my pencil, or I will just force myself not to look down, and it really loosens up my drawing style and gives it a more naive quality and really helps me to think about what I'm seeing. The sketchbooks really fed very naturally into my ceramics. These characters are each from different pages of a sketchbook, but once put onto ceramics, you can play with them on individual pieces and move them around and create different stories. And the narrative has always really interested me. How you can create your own stories and how other people can create stories from my work. I've always loved swimmers. They've been a big part of my work. It's the characters, the eccentric outdoor swimmers, and I love their very pink limbs when they come out of the water and their rosy red cheeks. So this has fed into my work over the years. There's something, there's a life drawing quality there, but it's also the characters and the way they all respond to one another. And it's fed very easily into my ceramics. So here, a bowl, they simply plunge into the water. And you can really, for me, I can really feel that atmosphere from having been there and drawn the swimmers. And there's something about being in a space and drawing it and looking very carefully that you can then almost smell the scene when you go back to it in your sketchbooks. And I work from sketchbooks onto my ceramics. I often take photos too, but the process of drawing from life really feeds back into my work and helps me visualize it when I go back to those sketchbooks. So I was really fortunate to find demand for my swimmer pots, my people pots, my illustrated ceramics. And I was working a bit like a factory, creating swimmer beakers, character pots, bowls, beakers, mugs, non-stop, 12 hours a day, trying to fulfill the demand for these illustrated ceramics. And it was around the time when I became a mother that I realised I actually couldn't work 12 hours a day like a factory on my own. So I decided to develop a new range, a range which would be produced for me. And it was a long and very steep learning curve. But I developed this range in bone china over probably 10 years, using slip casts of my wheel frame pots, and then using my illustrations, using the same method that I illustrate my one-off pieces. I would provide my illustrations to be very sophisticatedly scanned and then turned into screen prints here in Stoke. I'm going to talk more about this project in a couple of weeks. There's, is it the 14th? The BCB, we have a discussion about working with others and kind of sustaining your creativity. So I won't go more into this project now. It was a really big project and a really challenging one, but it was really important to me that I kept production in the UK, and I was really keen to work with people in Stoke. And so I ended up handing over the production to Duchess China Works, and they now make this collection for me. These are my functional pots designed for everyday use, and they sell now all over the world as a kind of, I call it my daily wear range. So, going back to my exhibition pieces, the really nice thing about setting up the production range is it allowed me to let go of feeling I had to make my ceramics functional, and it was almost a positive that I could separate the two works and produce a functional range and then really explore a kind of conceptual, playful, fun storytelling element to my work. So I started exploring using props for my characters, and these are some of the first props I made: a tree, a bus, and a house. And I've been really influenced by illustration, and so I've tried to keep these props as flat as possible. The bus is really narrow, the tree is made from a flat slab of porcelain, and a house isn't the true width of a house. I want them to feel like they've just come out of a picture book. This one is called Fear of Diving, and it was really fantastic to have that freedom to play with the story, with a bit of humour, and to have that freedom now that there was, this was really my kind of fun project work. I love this. I love how simple two pieces can be, and yet you can tell exactly from her body language, her anxiety towards the diving board. I wanted to include these because these have influenced my work from the very beginning. When I was at art college, I did my thesis on automaton makers, and I've always been really fascinated with people, observing people, their movement, and how very simple movements you can show a little story through their body language. And I think automata have this very naive quality where you can actually read a lot from just a few simple movements. This is by someone called Paul Spooner, who has done a lot of work. I think he's at the Science Museum in London. He's done a lot of pieces there, but he's inspired children and adults alike, and it's on the border between art and toys. And I love the sense, the kind of British sense of humour in his work, and how it reflects a lot about body and the way people move. This is kind of fed through my work in the background, something I've always looked at and been interested in. Again, this one, body language. I wish I had film footage of them to show you, but they're very simple, jerky movements of people, and you can read a lot of, there's a whole story in that of these two heads chattering to each other. So when I discovered the medium of stop motion, I was so excited, because for me it had a little bit of that automata in it. It was bringing the piece to life, and it was still quite jerky, quite simple, quite naive, quite raw. Does this one play? This is raw footage when I first was making my animation. And it reminds me so much of what you see in those jerky automata movements as well. This was really a real breakthrough for me when I discovered you could do this with ceramics. It was actually during the lockdowns that I was introduced to this by my 10-year-old son. We were homeschooling, and there was a lot of time to fill, and we thought it would be a fun project, and in the end it became my obsession. So I was making these stories. I've been doing these now for 1 or 2 years, and finding the stop motion, it opened new doors for me, and I thought I could really bring these characters to life and have a lot of fun with them. When I heard about the BCB and the project, the opportunity to work on a kind of self-driven project, I got really excited, because I had this great idea that I would love to turn this into a proper stop motion animation. And it felt at the time, it was back in October, I think, that we put in our applications and put forward our projects. It felt at the time that it was a really critical time it felt really important to me that there was so much change in the world around us, and we'd all experienced a very, very different last year. And it felt like a really important time to document it. And I've always documented everyday life and, the mundane day-to-day things, but it felt, even documenting that in the last year, there was so much change. It didn't have to be a strong story. It's just an observation of what we've been through, and it could actually make a really interesting piece. So I didn't really think through what a difficult subject it is, because everyone's experience through the pandemic has been so different. And I didn't want to undermine the significance of it and how difficult it has been for so many people. So I wanted to pull out from it some positives. I wanted to try and remember, for people to remember the things which, you know, we may, as time goes by, forget. And I wanted to just document them as an observation. So this is the beginning of my stop motion, and I wanted to create a very busy, bustly city landscape. And then overnight, everything empties. And I remember in our neighbourhood, the only things on the streets were foxes and the ducks walking across the street like they own the place. It was amazing. And this pub in the distance, the Great Tavern, they had this amazing billboard outside saying, "Shut happens." And it really struck a chord in me, because it was that very English sense of humour, but so sad as well at the same time. These are a nod to the ways we communicated, clapping and banging pots and pans outside our house. And then the teddy bears in the window and the rainbows in the window. For me, that was quite significant for us, because I have 3 primary school children. And then as time goes by, things moving on and people out with their masks, but the buses are empty. Haha. I thought I'd include these to give you an idea of the kind of the scale of the project, because I hadn't really considered just how much work goes into every single piece when creating a little city. And the timings are so crucial. Balancing the clay so that it dries and allows these. I work in porcelain, so when you fire these, there's a good chance things can collapse. So everything was very carefully put together, and it was a huge challenge to fire everything. And this is the beginnings of drawing out my sketches onto the pots. I don't make my life easy for myself, and I have a very, very laborious method of drawing onto porcelain. Again, trying to loosen up my drawing style, I use a technique of line drawing through a carbon paper I make up using underglaze stains. So I hold the paper onto my clay and do a line drawing onto the reverse of the piece of paper, and it leaves a mark onto the porcelain. I love it because it's a really gorgeous way of mark making, and it makes a really lovely line. But the downside is it's very, very time consuming. And I hadn't considered, when I started this project, that we would still be at home the whole time while I was making it. And I hadn't realised I would be homeschooling again for the first 3 months of the project. And so all of this was created in my family home, and I didn't have space in my studio. It's a small room within the house to lay everything out. So in the end, I had to take over the kitchen and lie everything out and, you know, scream at the children to stop them knocking things over. And it was absurd, really. But this was planning and plotting it and trying to work out how every bit pieced together, stage by stage. And that's that's the end.
Oh, wow. Helen, thank you so much. I wanted to open the floor to anybody, if anybody had any questions they might like to ask at this stage. I have a few. I wanted to ask, what made you decide to study a creative subject? Like, how did you decide that you wanted to become an artist, a maker, a potter?
It wasn't really ever a thought. I didn't really consider any other option. I think because, I've shown the drawing I did at such an early age, I've been obsessively creative since I was tiny, and fortunately I came from a very artistic family, and it was, encouraged to follow that path.
Oh, that's gorgeous, thank you. And my next question is, how long did that stop motion take to make?
The actual filming or the...
The filming, yes, because, yeah.
So the filming must have been about 2 weeks, because again it was done on the floor of my back room at home, and I had to do it all based around the light, so I could only film in the mornings when the sun wasn't shining in on that side. And I could have carried on. I could have kept on filming for weeks and weeks longer. I think eventually my husband said to me, I think it's time to stop. Because, you get so involved in a project. it's sometimes hard to know when to stop. But
and when you're really enjoying it as well,
yeah,
it seems with the work that you've produced, it seems like you've really enjoyed it.
it's definitely an exciting new medium for me and something I will do more of. Yeah, yeah.
Just a practical question. You use the carbon paper for drawing.
Yes.
You really like that medium.
Yeah.
So why did you prefer that to using a pencil, for example?
It's two reasons. The pencil is a different mark. This is very much like a printed mark. You sort of get it's a strong black line for starters. So once it's fired, you get a very rich black colour rather than a ceramic pencil in black is a bit paler. But also because it's reversed, it's like a relief print, and you're pressing down onto this sort of gooey black underglaze colour that I've washed onto onto newspaper. It leaves a mark which is soft. But it's got an edge to the line. It's very nice. It's a very nice line that it creates. And the second reason is that it really frees up what I'm doing. If I work in pencil, I can see directly what I'm drawing, but by having a piece of carbon paper and not seeing what you're actually drawing, you take the piece of paper away and it might not be quite what you expected, but it's the joy of that I like.
Thank you. I was just wondering that now you've created such a kind of, so many objects, would you think about creating new films using those same objects, but like different narratives maybe? Yes, and I may well do. I mean, that's a nice thing about doing individual objects, because you can take them and mix them with new objects and, work in different forms. I don't think I would ever create such a large piece again, because actually the stop motion seems to work really well on a kind of smaller scale. So, it's completely new to me, this way of working. So there's a lot to explore. Yeah.
Lovely, Helen. Thank you so much for sharing with us. That was
Thank
a real
you.
joy to listen and to learn more.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.